Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Gale Brewer has more information and knows more people than anyone else I know. This walking information kiosk gives proof to the adage that knowledge is power. What a great advantage that is to the residents of Manhattan's West Side, me included, whom she so ably represents in the City Council. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. I'm trying to fill your big shoes.
Oh, please, I wasn't going to tell anybody it's the district I used to represent.
No, it's definitely your big shoes. People talk about you and say how much they enjoyed working with you, and I have to say, well, I'm following Ronnie, and I always say that I can be, try really hard to be as warm and as responsible as she is, but they are big shoes to fill. They are
no, that's too much for me.
Not at all.
Thank you. So is your life different now that you've been elected to public office than it used to be?
Well, you know, when I was working for Ruth Messenger in the council, I did go to a lot of evening meetings, and we did work hard on, you know, constituents and so on. But it is a difference when you really have to, the buck stops and you have to try to solve a problem. You know, it could be development, or it could be an individual, or it could be voting on something to do with the homeless or general welfare issues. But it is different, and you feel very responsible. Yeah. Very responsible.
I think it is. It's that personal responsibility and that frustration that comes, the inability to do if you can't do it.
Yes.
But you always work very hard.
We always work hard, and I have a great staff, as you did, a fabulous staff, and they work much too hard.
Yeah. Are you working harder than most other members?
Well, that's what people say. They, you know, I think you develop kind of a persona. You know, we each have our own persona. You don't really know you have it till you have 50 colleagues and they tell you what it is. Yeah. And they think that we work very hard and that we have a great staff and that we're very serious about our work. And we have fun. But there is a lot of work to be done.
And do they always come to you for information?
They come to us partly because we're the information kiosk, as you said. We have the biggest email list, as you probably know. But it's also because I have been doing this for a long time. So I know what goes on in terms of some of the policies and the agencies.
Yeah. So you just have this vast knowledge. It's really incredible. Did you always have an interest, the same interest in collecting information and disseminating it?
You know, I always did. And I was thinking when I worked in the mayor's office, in David Dinkins' office, and it was way before the computer, like a whole 2 years or 3 years. Yes. And I remember collecting, because I was in the federal office, and I remember collecting all information about federal agencies and disseminating it to the city council and to the policymakers at City Hall. Where
did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston.
So in your family, and were they in public service?
Yes. My father was in Massachusetts, there's something called the selectmen, the old town meeting concept.
So that's the local council member,
yeah,
right?
He was, and he rode in the local parade, and he was the selectman, one of the selectmen for many years.
From Boston? Or
it was from a place.
Was he a Democrat?
He was a Democrat. Although he went on and worked in a Republican administration in Washington, but he was a Democrat when I first was campaigning for him.
So that had an influence?
It had a big influence.
I'm fascinated always at how people land up someplace, and it seems to me more and more that a lot of it comes from the environment you grow up in, but then every once in a while somebody comes along and it's not that case at all, you know, right. So it's very strange. And so then when you went to school and everything, were you the kind of person who loved to do research papers?
I was the kind of person who liked to be active in the student council, and certainly was always involved because I grew up in the 60s, which is interesting now because staff members are not part of the 60s, you know, so it's a whole different world, as you know. Yeah. So I grew up even in high school organizing against the war and participating in rallies and getting buses to go to Washington and getting high school students even to participate. If I could think about high school, I think about studying, and I always loved history and, you know, English, but I also loved organizing.
So this is absolutely nothing new to you?
Well, this is new because we don't usually have, when you're organizing a $40 billion budget, as you know, and you don't have to really think about people's lives, you know, every single day. That's different now.
Do you find now with Iran and the world situation any kind of memories of the 60s and any kind of comparison about what's happening?
Yeah, you do. It's so different, though, because in the 60s, at least the people I was around in Cambridge, which is where I was in high school, they were definitely against the war. There wasn't really much discussion. I know, obviously, there were many people in other parts of America, but in my world, people were against the war. And here, even on the West Side, as you know, it's a controversial issue.
Do you think they really understand? I mean, what war are they in favor? I mean, I have the feeling that people are so confused and that they don't really understand, and we really haven't heard. We haven't heard any strong leaders coming out to say this is not what I like, and let's discuss something different.
I think that's true. I mean, I did go to the first Washington event, March, and we had a bus that our friend Jessica Mates organized, but we were, I think, the only elected official there out of 100,000 people, to the best of my knowledge, even locally. And so it wasn't something that caught on, except thank goodness for 100,000 people. But what was interesting, to go back to the 60s, a lot of people with gray hair, and it was nice to see them there.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I think that if you're on the net, and you certainly on the internet, you must get a lot of the stuff that's going on. There's an enormous amount of activity against the war on the internet.
Yes, tremendous. And with, I think, facts. You know, sometimes on the net you don't really know, but with facts about what's really going on.
But what's also interesting is that a lot of these people who are organizing this are 21, 22 years old, young, so they don't have the experience from the 60s of how you take that underground or internet exchange of ideas and the growing constituency and make it more public. I think actually there was an article in the paper about that, the challenge of people who started moveon.org, which is a wonderful website. People should look at it. That they're saying now that they've got to become more public, and that they had said they wanted to take an ad a couple of months ago, and they asked for money one day, and within 24 hours or 48 hours they had raised over $400,000 credit card contributions on the internet. So they're now starting radio and television ads in different communities, because they realize they have to take the next step.
Right. Well, always on the internet, what people forget is, even if you want to advertise something, you have to do it in magazines, you have to do it on the street. You cannot just rely.
One part.
You cannot just rely on the internet. And people, I think advertisers realize that. Not at the beginning, but they do now. And so it's the same for movements. But there's not a lot of, I think it's interesting though, people are reacting by being very concerned about civil liberties, at least the people I know, but they're also reacting by staying closer to home and paying more attention to what's going on in their neighborhood, because it's so confusing internationally and nationally.
But it's going to get worse, I think, as these troops move out, and as if we get closer and closer to war, the reality, I mean, we have generations that have never seen a draft and didn't know what Charlie Rangel was talking about when he mentioned the draft.
Or see the call-up.
Change and the call-up, which is just starting now of the guards.
I think we're going to have many police officers, for instance, and firefighters who are the type of persons who might belong to the guard, who are going to be going, and so we'll have less individuals here guarding our streets. It is it's sort of surreal.
It is, anyway. But I think it's incumbent on some of us who've lived through the 60s to try to impart to other people. And there is a march on Saturday, whatever the date is, and then there's going to be another mass demonstration in New York in the middle of February, which I think they're asking lots of people to do. Dick Starkey, who comes from the West Side, has an opinion piece in Newsday, I think, today, and he went on that bus ride. He said that he quoted some Jonathan Fraser or somebody saying there's nothing as wonderful as spending something like 16 hours on a bus talking with people who vigorously agree with you.
Well, you know, it was quite a day, because it was pouring cats and dogs in New York City at 5 a.m. And when we got to Washington, D.C., we unlayered. It was 80 degrees. So there was something dramatic about all of that. And the people just poured out, not quite sure what they were going to expect, those of us who had not been on a march for a very long time.
And it was different. This is what Starkey's article is. Unless we get some of the more traditional, middle-of-the-road people into this, it's become this whole group of wonderful young people and other people who have special issues, but they're all tangential to the general issue that's going to appeal to everybody. And so he was appealing, I think, for more people to come out and go to marches or let their opinions know. I didn't mean to talk about this with you, but it's good because you were an activist from the 60s, and it makes us really realize what's happening. I want to know about the rest of your life. I know you're married to a very interesting man.
He works, as you know, anybody who's got children or grandchildren adores him, because he works at the American Museum of Natural History, entomology, which is bugs, as we know, and he has live tarantulas in his office.
And they love it.
And children love live tarantulas. I think some of them are pregnant, so it's a really good time to go visit.
How exciting.
Yes.
I took some of my grandchildren, and they showed them all these different bugs, and they were at a stage where they love bugs. I'm not sure that they still love them, but it would be nice if everybody could continue like that.
Well, he's auctioned off now. The parents in the district have discovered him. And so for the school fairs, one of the auction items is a tour with Cal Snyder behind the scenes
at the Museum of Natural History.
Bugs.
Oh, that's wonderful. And he has all these trays and drawers and cabinets filled with bugs. So people should definitely do that. And then you live in a brownstone in the West Side Urban Renewal area.
Yeah.
Did you buy it from the city?
No, we did not. We bought it from a private developer, somebody who had it empty for 15 years. And so we're actually the second family. The first family was there from 1886 to 1981. And as typical on the West Side, everybody in the block knew the gentleman when he died.
Isn't that something?
And so it's a very special house.
And the West Side Urban Renewal area is a very special area.
Very special.
I lived there for years, but don't live there anymore, but it was very special.
It was very special.
And then you run a bed and breakfast.
We have a bed and breakfast on the top floor. And we have people coming in from all over the place, sort of word of mouth, and they seem to come back and back and back. So it's great.
So you have all this energy.
We have
energy. And you've always had this energy, right?
I have always had this energy.
And how many kids you've also raised?
Boys and a couple of girls.
Couple of girls.
Yeah, we've had foster care, and we've also had a couple of adopted children. And we did it because, just a commitment. I'm on a lot of boards of directors. Not now, but before I was elected, drug treatment programs, alternative to incarceration programs, and people actually do leave children in hospitals and don't pick them up. So I had friends who worked in the psychiatric divisions of different hospitals, and they would call me and say, can you pick up so-and-so because nobody's coming here. So we did that over the years, and I learned a lot, and some kids turn out well, and some young people don't. But it's been a great experience.
It's a hard, wonderful experience. Do you work with the Agency for Children's Services now?
Well, I'm on the General Welfare Committee, so I have a sense, and also on mental health. And actually with mental health, one of the issues is what kind of service you get when you come out of jail. And that is something that I have experienced with some of the young people.
It's a very important issue, isn't it?
It's a very important issue.
How old are the young people when you talk about that?
Well,
is this juvenile detention or adult?
Juvenile. Although, they get older. Some of them do get, or their friends get in trouble. You sort of, the network, as you know.
Yeah. But you're a committee that you have in the City Council. Let's get back to city politics. Your committee in the City Council is one about technology.
That's the one that I chair. There's a select committee on technology and government.
Right. And where are we as far as a government with the use of technology?
I think there are a couple of things that are going well. One is that we have a bill that is going to be passed in January or beginning of February by the full council. And it's kind of a dream come true because I've always believed, as you know, in making sure, as you have, that all government information that should be public is public, as opposed to, on somebody's shelf. So this bill says that any government document that's public and that's defined has to be up on the net within 10 days.
Ooh, very.
So that means if it's good news or bad news. It could be a report that X agency sends to the City Council as mandated by the administrative code or by the charter. And so that particular information has to be up on the internet within 10 days. That's the first in the country.
That's very good.
So we're excited about that.
That's not correspondence. Let's not have people think that they can, instead of foiling the Freedom of Information Act, but this is a report.
A report. Maybe like the homeless, how many homeless and how they're being housed or not housed. That's an official report.
Right.
Some of this is up now, but not everything.
And that includes then all the stuff from, does it include stuff from EDC, the Economic Development Corporation?
It's a
job retention
city
and
agent,
stuff like
any
that?
city agency.
Very good.
Yeah. And it's all defined, because it's hard to define what's an official, but it is defined in the bill. And it's a good start. Hopefully it'll be expanded.
Right. I was interested to see that the Department of Finance's tax records, the assessments are, is it the taxes? that went public that you read about it in gossip columns,
Yes,
that they
I
picked
saw
up the
that.
information to
In the
tell you what
Post.
stars are paying for what or something like
Big
that?
picture of Woody Allen in the Post
Yeah.
with this information.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw that also.
So now tell me about the city council.
Well-
I haven't been back there since it's really changed, and it has changed, I take it, because you sat through the old city council.
It has changed.
Yeah.
It has changed. It's very energetic, and I think I like my colleagues, and that makes a big difference. We got to know each other because before we were elected, which was actually 2000, late
November
fall,
of 2000.
right, late fall, we met as part of the Fresh Democracy group, a group of 25 out of the 38 new ones coming in due to term limits. And we talked about changing the rules, things that you helped us do, made some suggestions. And we worked, and we got some rules, changed when we came together for voting. But the point of the matter is that we actually met and worked late into the night and trusted each other. It's made a big difference, that kind of working together on a project. We didn't have any staff, we didn't have any offices, we were just individuals trying to make a difference. So then we, for a year, we've been working together. And I would say it's a very, it's a bright group of people, everybody trying to make a difference. It's very time conscious, I would say, because you got redistricting. So you got 2 years now, and if you win, then 2 years again. But it always feels like you have to make your mark. So I think that's a challenge. Everybody in that kind of competition.
I read in the paper today that so far only 5 people, I think, have filed for running against an incumbent.
Yeah, I didn't know what that number was, but you don't hear a lot of discussions about people, having incumbents, having a challenge to the incumbency.
Right. Are there districts that are particularly vulnerable? Do you know? I mean,
I think the redistricting, people pretty much got what they wanted. There were some districts in Queens, as you can imagine, that were much higher than number-wise. For instance, I think the general number for a district is around 160,000. And some of the Queens districts, due to our wonderful immigrants, were up to 190,000.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So they had to cut a little bit and shift around.
I think that when I was there, that the average size was about 142,000. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's what it is.
It's up a little bit then, because don't forget the population went to 8.
It's increased.
Yeah, it went to 8 million, so it's up to 100, it could be a little bit less.
The district that you represent is one of the most compact, or if not the most compact district in the council.
I think it is the most compact, basically from 55th to 96th Street. Yeah, it is very compact.
So it stays that way.
It stays that way. A little bit additional, but it stays that way.
It's a wonderful district, right?
It's a fabulous district. It's absolutely fabulous.
On the hand, and I know this is a terrible thing to say, its problems, some of the problems are great. There are people in that district who have very severe economic problems. But if you take that district and you compare it to some other districts in the city, we don't begin to compare to the problems that they have.
True.
True.
I think it's true. It's interesting. First of all, I notice in other districts, colleagues, because we compare, how's it going with the constituents, how's your district office, what are some of the issues? The issues, for instance, in parts of Brooklyn or parts of the Bronx, the difference is, unfortunately, people aren't as active, and they don't complain, or they don't bring the issues to the forefront as much, and so.
It's a very serious difference.
And so they have huge problems. I mean, the incomes are lower. They don't have that landlord harassment challenge, though. I don't think as much. I mean,
I think that's growing, though.
It is
from what
growing.
I've heard,
gentrification
in Brooklyn and lots, and especially with people living in 2-family houses and stuff, because they're not as. There's a different kind of rent regulation or control, I think. I don't quite know, but I think it is growing. I think it's a domino theory. When the rents go up and
people
the cost
move.
of housing. It just goes out further. They move further out. And your district...
It's really intense.
It is. And it's gotten really exacerbated, hasn't it?
It's really exacerbated. The Mitchell-Lama situation. Last night we were at a Mitchell-Lama meeting, which of course are middle-income homes, apartments in our district that were built 20 years ago. And now the owners can buy out.
These are the ones that are hit the 20-yearly, and they're buying out?
Yeah, and it's really sad to see a whole building of, packed auditorium. And knowing that, yes, people might be able to stay during this time period while they're living in their apartments, but another generation will not be able to get affordable housing in a wonderful neighborhood.
When they get bought out, they're still staying as rent regulated.
They will stay
stabilized. But they'll be subject to more increases than they would if they were staying under the Mitchell-Lama?
They will certainly be subject to more increases, and once they unfortunately die or move.
Then it's on the open market?
Correct.
No income limitations, nothing?
Correct.
And then you have it at the other end. I mean, I don't live in a subsidized house. I live in a luxury house. And I just got my new estimated assessment yesterday.
Yeah, I hate to say.
So that plus the increase anyway in the property tax.
A lot.
And the increase because of your assessment is going to really, I think, create havoc in a lot of these old co-ops, especially on the west side, because we've always had a mixture. I mean, the co-ops, which are now selling apartments for millions of dollars, have in them still older people who bought them years ago for $30,000 and $60,000 who really can't pay the kind of maintenances and taxes that are now being assessed.
It's a big problem on the west side. It's a big problem in homes, people who are on fixed incomes, who are living in homes and who bought them 30 years ago. Their children are grown, you know, like in Queens. It's a huge problem. I don't know. I mean, we do have to figure out how we're going to deal with balancing the budget, something that you dealt with, and at the same time not tax people out of existence and enabling them to stay here. And figuring out what the not cutting services to the point that nobody wants to live here. It's a really hard balance.
I was very lucky because I spent 12 years in the council between two recessions, and we really didn't have that problem. What we had was that urge to cut taxes, where some of us wanted not to do that because we wanted to build up the reserves, and we felt that we didn't want to cut. I mean, we just thought this was not sound economic policy. I think it's still not. But you have a real crisis.
A real crisis.
And when do you start the budget process?
Well, the mayor will give his initial delivery probably beginning of February. And then, as you know, there will be hearings, preliminary hearings in the city council. And then the mayor will give, you know, April, May, a new revised budget delivery. And then it goes to, you know, final negotiations, more budget hearings. Last year we went beyond the sort of June 5th deadline, but we were within the absolute necessity in terms of passage.
Are you organized in a different way? Are more people participating in the budget process?
I think so. I mean, we always hear lobbyists complain, so that's a good sign. You know, the paid lobbyists, not the citizen lobbyists. The paid lobbyist complains that it used to be that he or she could just call the speaker and then
get it.
And now he or she has to do some more work.
That's very good.
I thought that was a good sign.
Yes.
We're divided to the great credit of many people, but particularly Larry and Angelo, who's head of the finance division. And the way it works is that each delegation, we're sort of divided. I'm co-chair of the Manhattan delegation with Philip Reed, who is from East Harlem. And there are delegation heads for Brooklyn and all the other boroughs. And we meet to look at the budget that the finance division presents in terms of what the mayor suggests as the cuts and what we would, as a delegation, consider, or the finance division says, these are some suggestions. In other words, okay, we're going to cut child care, but you know, this is what we could restore. Do you think we should restore this amount or less or not at all? And we go through the different agencies. It's a very long process. And then that could take like a couple of days. And then that would be with the leadership, which includes, for instance, Bill Perkins from Manhattan, Gifford Miller, obviously, and all of the boroughs. And we literally take a vote. Okay, 3, you know, boroughs said keep child care, and 2 said cut. So it's been a long process, but it feels democratic with a small d.
So people should be getting in touch with their council members to let those council members know exactly how they feel and what they think the priorities should be.
They have already started, and they should.
Where do you estimate an increase? Do we estimate any way of increasing revenue? Well, which is the money that for the city that the city takes in.
I mean,
the governor seems to be opposed to any commuter tax.
I was going to say that's the commuter tax days of working in Washington for the city of New York of revenue sharing. You know, Bush is talking about an $80 gazillion billion dollar another cut.
Tax cut.
Right, and that makes no sense to any of us here.
Right.
So we could take that money and not do it. This is a little bit pie in the sky, and use it to help our cities and counties around the country. Personal income tax in Albany.
That's low because fewer people are making more money.
Right. I mean, I'm sort of
So it's a very bad time
I'm
for us.
challenged to come up with your good answers to your good questions.
Right. So the poor are going to get poorer.
It's scary because we don't want a
Unfortunately.
rich and poor island or city.
Right.
That's nothing in the middle to be able to, have the kinds of apartments and opportunities that Mitchell-Lama has offered. Jobs, the whole issue of trying to get some jobs that don't demand to have, 6 program skills to be able to, get a job. Those kinds of issues. We've been having a lot of discussions about that in the council. But there aren't great answers, to be honest with you.
It's a terrible time. I worry also about all the not-for-profit organizations that play such important roles in people's lives.
Right. I've spent a lot of time with the NORCs, something that you were great
The naturally occurring
retirement
communities.
And they're all thanks to you on the west side.
Oh, please.
Well, they are. We got 3. Most people only got 2
I know,
or
that
1.
was very lucky.
We were very fortunate.
That's because we have such wonderful people on the west side, as you said.
It's true. But we've been trying to, that was an example. They were on the cutting block at the last budget modification that came out in November, and we were able to restore them, particularly those that were working with residents of public housing.
Yeah. The Lincoln Square neighborhood.
Right.
They're very
nonprofits are important.
Yeah, these are residential developments usually, or houses where people bought in or lived there for 20, 30 years and have aged as they've lived there, and now they need new services, and the services, this is just for our audience that they know, but they're a wonderful, wonderful thing, and especially for New York City.
Wonderful.
It's just because they're right there in that one location.
But you're right about the nonprofit community, and it's frightening because don't forget, it's city cuts, it's state cuts, maybe it's federal cuts.
Right.
And so how do you, make sure that services are provided? What a lot of the nonprofits want is, let us decide where we're going to make our cuts. If we have to make cuts, and we do, please don't tell us it has to be, like for a senior center. Maybe we can find savings elsewhere.
We're coming to the end of this program. This half hour just flies. But would you tell us, please, what your, do you have a website? You have a newsletter. You do a lot of communicating on that.
We do a lot of newsletter.
So
and it's
give us that.
Well, you can email us. It's Gale, Gale. @council.nyc.ny.us, or you can just call us at 873-0282. 212. And the best of all is we're on 86th and Broadway in the old barber shop in the Belnord.
And you don't have to live in the district to get onto your list, and you will see why Gale is this walking kiosk, because her office distributes the information that everybody needs. So do call and put your name on her list, and thank you very much for coming, and thank you for listening.